Hello, and welcome to Budget Commander. On this channel, we'll discuss Magic the Gathering topics with a focus on playing Commander on a budget. We'll cover things like deck building, top cards, deck techs, and more. Let's get started. Hey friends, today we have a rotation guide video for you. In this video, we're just going to look at some of the cards that are rotating out of standard that I see in my circle, my 2DH circle. So all the cards we're going to look at are going to be $2 or under and be solid Commander pickups that hopefully you would enjoy playing with. This is not a finance guide in any way, so if you're hoping to, pick up a bunch of copies of a card that are going to go up in value, in the next few years, this is not for you. This is just a guide for you to figure out some cards that you're able to buy when they're usually at their cheapest. So when cards rotate out of standard is usually when the card is at its cheapest cost, and then hopefully you'll be able to play with it in your Commander group for a long time before either if you play with a limit like me where you can't go over $2 or before it gets ruined or whatever. Anyhow, let's get into cards. We're gonna start with white cards. We have Mentor of the Meek. Just an excellent way to draw cards. Make a Stand prevents you from losing creatures, and then Danitha Capuchin Paragon, which all these cards are under $1, 50 cents, 24 cents, and 35 cents. Solid cards to pick up. Daring Archaeologist is a great card. Helps you keep your hand nice and full by returning artifacts from your graveyard to your hand. 30 cents. Teshar, Ancestor's Apostle. Here's a legendary you might want to consider playing. Whenever you cast a historic spell, return target creature card with convert make has 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So great way to get recursion there. Only 49 cents. And then Baird, which I see all the time. Steward of Argive, and he says creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. He's a 2/4 with vigilance, but mostly you like that detaining ability where you're not really detaining, deterring ability to prevent your opponents from attacking you. Blue cards that are coming out of standard, we have One with the Machine, Arcane Adaptation, and Precognition Field. Arcane Adaptation is for those people that like to play tribal decks. It turns all your creatures into the type you choose. So if you like a certain all Merfolk or all dragons or whatever, this makes it so your non-dragon or non-Merfolk are the type you choose, which helps for the cards that say all your dragons get +3/+3, like Crucible of Fire or something like that. One with the Machine, draw cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among artifacts you control. Big draw spell. Seen people draw, seven cards because they have a Mer Battlesphere out or something, which it's like just gives them more gas. And then Precognition Field, you may look at the top card of your library. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an instant or sorcery, or you can pay 3 to exile the top card of your library and help you get to an instant or sorcery. So Precognition Field just gives you card advantage that is kind of sneaky. Your opponents don't really notice it as much as an obvious card that just says draw a card, such as Kumena's Awakening, which I see a fair amount. Costs two colorless, 2 blue, and it's an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card. If you have the City's Blessing, which means you have 10 or more permanents on the battlefield, instead only you draw a card. So this card is a little bit dangerous to cast, especially early on, because I've noticed your opponents, or even myself if I'm playing against this card, I want to remove the Kumena's Awakening player's permanents to keep that player underneath that 10 permanent, or from getting the City's Blessing, so I get to keep drawing cards. So the table a little bit hates on you to help themselves. So be careful with that one when you cast it and things like that. Antiquities War, which is one of those saga enchantments. So the first 2 turns, you play it. On the first turn, you look at the top 5 cards of your library. You reveal an artifact card from among them, put it in your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So usually you're playing this in Artifact Matters decks, and it just says pick your favorite artifact of the top 5 cards. You do that 2 turns in a row, and then on the 3rd turn, artifacts you control become base power and toughness 5/5 until end of turn. So hopefully you can wipe somebody out, or maybe multiple players. Herald of Secret Streams. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters can't be blocked. So great for those +1/+1 decks. Then we have Patient Rebuilding. Gives you the ability to mill your opponents and also draw yourself cards. Spell Swindle. Super swingy card. You counter somebody's spell and then you get X treasure. X is that spell's converted mana cost. I do not like having this cast on my stuff. Feels terrible. And then In Bolus's Clutches, which just allows you to steal anything. So a lot of people think this is only, steal a creature, but you can actually enchant an artifact, a land, whatever you want to steal, you can steal something. Karn's Temporal Sundering allows you to bounce somebody's permanent and take an extra turn. And then we have River's Rebuke, which just returns every permanent somebody has to their hand, all non-land permanents to their hand. So it's kind of like a death sentence for one player in a 4-player pod. And Memorial to Genius, which is just a solid land, draws you a couple cards late in the game when you don't need that extra mana. On to black cards. Reassembling Skeleton, solid recursion theme, or if you have, sacrifice theme, he's great because you can constantly bring him back from your graveyard. Walk the Plank, great removal card, costs just 2 black and you can destroy almost anything. It only hits non-merfolk, but solid card there. And then Vona's Hunger, which is a one-sided removal card, costs 2 and a black, and each opponent sacrifices a creature. Once again, if you have the City's Blessing, so 10 or more permanents. Instead, each opponent sacrifices half the creatures he or she controls rounded up. So can get you quite a few things late in the game, or it gets you some of their better things. Maybe they only have their commander out and they're forced to sacrifice it off of Vona's Hunger. I've seen this card do some good work. Phyrexian Scriptures. Don't see this one too often, but it's another saga. First time you put it out, it gets you a +1/+1 counter on one creature. That creature becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. Then the next turn, you destroy all non-artifact creatures. So a lot of people want to blow this up if they can help it. So if they have enchantment removal, this is going away if they're not in a commanding, if they are in a commanding position. And then the final one is exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. So really powerful when it does get off, but it's really hard to get off with a full table because everybody just really wants to remove it before you get to that second saga. Raider's Wake, I really like this one. Whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. If you're playing a universal discard deck strategy, this just drains everybody's life as well, further reducing their resources. And then at the beginning of your own end step, if you attack with a creature this turn, you can make somebody lose a life, make somebody discard cards, which also makes them lose life. So it just kind of snowballs on itself. Final Parting, search your library for 2 cards, put them into your hand, put 1 into your hand and 1 into your graveyard. Great for those recursion decks. Gets you 1 thing you need right now, 1 thing you can bring back later. Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. Great card, costs 5 black. It says put up to 1 target creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and then destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. So 2 for 1 there. Does get exiled after, and you do have to have a legendary creature or planeswalker to cast it because it's a legendary sorcery, so it's a little bit hard to cast. But in the right deck, solid card. Cabal Stronghold, just add a ton of mana, pay 3, tap it, and then you get 1 black for each swamp you control. So in a mono black deck, you're doubling your mana there, which is super powerful. And then Tetzimoc Primal Death, a 6/6 with Death Touch, so a big body with a relevant ability. But even cooler, you can pay a black, reveal that you have him in your hand, and then put a prey counter on target creature, and then activate. You can only activate that ability on your turn. And then when Tetzimoc enters the battlefield, destroy each creature your opponents control with a prey counter on it. So if you usually don't want to use this until you have 7 mana, where you can pay a black and put a prey counter on something, and then cast him for 6 and destroy those things. Maybe you have 8 or 9 mana and you're able to blow up 2 or 3 things. But this card's fun and I like it. Red cards. Blood Sun is a 2 and a red. Enters the battlefield, draws you a card. And then all lands lose all abilities except mana ability. So it just turns off your opponent's lands. Solid. Vance's Blasting Cannons helps get you some extra card advantage by exiling the top card of your library at the beginning of your upkeep. And then if it's a non-land card, you can cast it this turn. Whenever you cast your third spell in a turn, so if you cast 3 spells in one turn, you get to transform Vance's Blasting Cannons into Spitfire Bastion, which is a legendary land that taps for a red. But more importantly, you can pay 2 in a red and tap the Spitfire Bastion to Lightning Bolt something. So it only gets creatures or players, so you can't get planeswalkers. But just gives you extra stuff to do with your mana. It also gives you extra cards earlier on when you haven't cast 3 cards in a turn or 3 spells in a turn. Solid enchantment there. Sarkhan's Unsealing is a really sucky enchantment to play against. I've seen this in a dragon deck or several other decks that just play big things. They play a big thing and then they remove your medium to small thing, and they just continue to get bigger and bigger. Whenever they cast a creature with power 7 or greater, they get to remove all the things that have 4 or less toughness and deal that damage to their opponents. So that card is a fun card to play against. Demanding Dragon, just a great 5-drop, a 5/5 flyer for 5, and then when it enters, it's going to deal 5 damage to target opponent unless that player sacrifices a creature. So you give somebody a tough decision to make. You can also put them under a little decision fatigue as the game goes on. So Sunbird's Invocation. Oops. Let's go back. There we go. Sunbird's Invocation, a 6 to cast enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell from your hand, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is that spell's converted mana cost, and then you can cast a card with a revealed revealed this way with converted mana cost X or less without paying its mana cost. So it kind of cascades your deck and just gives you extra advantage. Next up we have Lathliss, the Dragon Queen. Another great card, 6/6 flyer for 6. And whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token. So it gives you more dragons when you play dragons. And it also allows you to pump up your dragon team by paying 1 in a red. All your dragons get +1/+0 until end of turn. Angrass Marauders is a 7 to cast 4/4. That's not great stats, doesn't have any extra keywords, but it does say if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. In those chaos decks or forcing people to attack decks, you see this one come up and it just accelerates the game, which is always fun when you're playing against a chaos player. On to green cards, Gaia's Blessing. 1 in the green. Target player shuffles 3 cards from their graveyard into their library, and then you draw a card. So you can cast this on your opponents if they have a recursion theme, or if you want to put things back into your library. That's great. Also helps protect you from those mill players, because it says when Gaia's Blessing is put into your graveyard from your library, you get to shuffle your graveyard into your library. So if you got somebody who's playing mill in your deck and you got a green deck, might want to throw this, or mill in your meta, sorry. Throw this in your deck, and it helps protect you from that, because when they mill this card, you can put everything back. Song of Freyalise, 2 to cast Enchantment Saga. Until your next turn, creatures you control gain tap, add 1 mana of any color. So if you're playing a bunch of mana dorks already, or a bunch of creatures, this turns them all into mana dorks. And then on the 3rd turn that this is out, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature, and those creatures get Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible until end of turn. Morrowind, the Nurturer. If you got an elf deck, you probably want to put her in there. She says whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Morrowind. Tap her to add a green equal to Morrowind's power. So she's going to slowly grow as you put more elves out, and then the more elves, or the more she grows, the more mana you can tap her for. Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma. Solid card in the 99, also fun to play as a commander. You might want to think about picking that up. Creature spells you cast with power 4 greater cost 2 less. And whenever Goreclaw attacks, each creature you control with power 4 or more gets +1/+1. and Trample. Last one is the Mending of Dominaria. Super good card. 5 to cast, so not as impactful right away, but over a long game, I really like this card. You put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then you can return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then shuffle your graveyard into your library. So turns 1 and 2, you mill stuff, you get stuff back into your hand from your graveyard, and then turn 3, put all the lands that have been in your graveyard onto the battlefield. Multicolored cards. Wrath Capuchin, he's a fun commander. He's got Flash, and he gives all your historic spells Flash. A 3/3 flyer for 4. Solid commander that's fun to play, and he's an uncommon, so bonus points if you play him. Same thing with Tatyova, but I've seen her. She's quite a bit more powerful, I think. 5 to cast, 3/3 that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, gain life and draw a card. And then the last one here on this page is a 6 to cast Sphinx, 6/6 flyer, enters the battlefield, and each opponent can't cast instant or sorceries until your next turn. And then if you attack with a Sphinx, you can pay white, blue, and X. And if you do, you get to gain X life and draw X cards. So Sphinx's Revelation on a creature on attack. Really powerful, gets out of hand if you can't deal with him. Profane Procession is kind of expensive. It costs 3 to put out, and probably not the turn you put it out, but maybe the same turn. You can pay 5 to exile a creature. Once you've exiled 3 creatures with Profane Procession, you get to turn it into Tomb of the Dusk Rose, which is a legendary land. It can add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, but we don't care about that. What we like is that you can pay 2, a white and a black, tap it, and put a creature you've exiled with it onto the battlefield. So you remove your opponent's threats, and then after you've removed 3 of them, you get to turn those threats into your own threats. I really like that one. Fun to play against and fun to play with. Poison Tip Archer, a 2/3 reacher with Death Touch, and whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses a life. Solid uncommon. Grand Warlord Rada. I don't see this one as a commander often, but I see her in the 99 all the time. She's a 3/4 with haste, and whenever one or more creatures you control attack, add that much mana in any combination of red or green until end of turn. You don't lose mana as steps and phases end. So attack with a bunch of things, get a bunch of mana, then you can put more things out, so the next turn you can attack with more things. Rupture Spire is another card that's rotating out, which I see all the time. It's a little bit slow for me, but a lot of people in my play group play this card. Not a lot. A fair amount of people play this one because this just does a really good job of fixing colors. Colorless cards. Blackford Blade Reforged is a 2 to cast equipment, 3 to equip it to a legendary, 7 to equip it to anything else. But it gives that creature +1/+1 for each land you control. So just make something huge. And then Dowsing Dagger helps ramp you if you can get damage in on somebody. You put it out for 2, and you give one player a 2/0/2 plant tokens. And then you equip it to one of your creatures. That creature gets +2/+1. And when you deal damage to a player, probably someone different than the one who has plants, you get to turn Dowsing Dagger into Lost Veil, which you can tap for 3 mana. Chaos Wand. This card is cool. Pay 3 to put it out, and then pay 4. Target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery card. Then you can cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of that player's library in a random order. So you're plucking cards out of their deck, making their draws less relevant, and also getting to cast stuff for 4. Not necessarily are you going to get a good mana trade on that, but it does add some fun to the game. Desecrated Tomb, great for recursion decks. Cost 3 to put it out. Whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 1/1. So you're pulling stuff out of your graveyard to put it back onto the battlefield. You get a 1/1 in addition to it. But more importantly, it protects you from those exile effects. If somebody's going to exile your whole graveyard, now they have to think twice about it, because if you got 40 cards in there, they're going to give you 40 bats, which they have to either have a way to deal with, or they need to get rid of the tomb first. Dragon's Horde is a 3 to cast mana rock, and if you're in a dragon deck, you should be running it because it draws you extra cards when you don't need the mana. Forebear's Blade is great equipment because it gives +3/+0, vigilance, and trample. Trample is super important, otherwise your big things can't get by your opponent's blockers. Transmogrifying Wand is a 3 to cast artifact that gets 3 counters when it enters, and then you can pay 1 and tap it to destroy a creature and then create a 2/4 Ox for that player. So kind of like Beast Within, except for it only targets a creature and they get a 2/4 Ox instead. Downside is you can only activate the ability at sorcery speed. So you're going to 3-for-1 on this card over the long haul if it stays out. But if you need to be able to answer things at instant speed in your meta, you can't run this card. Otherwise, it's great. Last one is Joyous Familiar, just a cost reducer, makes all your historic spells cost 1 less. Remember, historics are artifacts, legendaries, and saga cards. Thran Temporal Gateway is a 4 to cast artifact that says pay 4, tap it, and you can put a historic card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you're running a historic style deck, this is a great way to cheat stuff out. Zhalfirin Void, see this one quite a bit, especially in those 1-color decks. If you're running just red or just white, you can throw this in there and it gives you a little bit of scry. Enters the battlefield, scry 1. Doesn't give you the color you need, but if you don't need a lot of colors, that is a nice utility land. Detection Tower is a great utility land as well. Helps get rid of hexproof on your opponent's creatures. Last one we're going to talk about here is Arch of Orazca. It is a land that can tap to add you a colorless, but you can also pay 5 and tap this. So it's kind of like paying 6 to draw a card. You only get to activate it if you have the City's Blessing. So that kind of sucks and it's pretty expensive, but do see this one a fair amount in my meta. So hope you guys saw some cards you didn't know were rotating out or that were budget that were leaving standard. Maybe you found 1 or 2 cards to pick up for a deck that you have. And I hope this video was helpful for you. Let me know in the comments which cards you like that are leaving standard or which ones I missed that you think are good budget grabs. And we'll talk to you next time. Peace. Thanks for watching. You can help support this channel by hitting that subscribe button. This will help keep you up to date on content from Budget Commander. If you liked the video, make sure you like the video. Leave me a comment with your thoughts on this topic. And if you think someone else could benefit from this video, feel free to share. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk with you next time.